Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the EBA webinar podcast series. My name is Aaron Smith. I'm the CEO of EBA, and I'm joined by Marielle McLaughlin today. We've got a great panel, some friends of EBA that are here, Jennifer Castenson. We've got Dennis Steigerwald from Housing Innovation Alliance, Dan Weissman, and Joe Butler, and they're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, offsite modular housing. We will have the Q&A section and the chat section open today. So you can put any questions that you have there, and we'll get to those throughout today's presentation. And then, as always, we'll upload this to our learning management system at eba.org and on the Better Homes, Better Future podcast within the next couple of days. So welcome, everyone. So great to see you.
Yeah, great to be here.
Thanks for inviting us. Great to see
Absolutely.
everybody. Okay, well, I will take it away. Jennifer Castenson with Build Exact and contributing writer for Forbes. I've also done some things for Modular Advantage and Green Builder Media. Really excited to be here and learning a lot from Dan, Dennis, and Joe. And can't wait to share that with you guys, but really want to make this interactive and engaging. So anytime you guys have questions, and if you would, just in the chat, just kick us off with if you've done anything with panelization or offsite or modular, just give us an idea of where you're at with that in the chat. And then also, as you have questions, just throw them in the chat as well, and we'll try to address them as they come up. But we're going to run through a couple like high-level slides just to give you a framework for what we're thinking and feeling and how we're running, how we're looking at offsite and the various aspects of offsite construction. So with that being said, and how it ties into sustainability. So with that being said, I'm going to share a presentation, and then I'm going to pass it over to Dan, who is with National Association of Realtors, and he's going to kick us off here. So let me just launch the presentation, and I'll get out of your way, Dan.
Sounds good. Wait for that to launch. Good afternoon, everybody. Really excited to chat about construction. I am not seeing the slide deck launch yet.
Okay, I can see it on my end.
Yeah, I just see the one slide, but not
Yeah, I'm not seeing the screen or the presentation mode yet either, Dan.
Yeah, I'm not either. I'm just seeing the.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm only seeing the. Maybe we lost Jennifer.
Yeah, she does look frozen a little bit. Jennifer, can you turn your camera off, and maybe that'll free up some bandwidth for the presentation?
Let's do this.
There we go. There's Dan. Jennifer's off. Jennifer, you want to try sharing it again with your camera off? Okay, well, fill in the blanks, Dan. Where are you today? What beautiful city are you in today?
All right. Hi, everybody. Dan Weissman with the National Association of Realtors. I run our strategy and innovation team. So
Nice.
Heavy focus on technology, understanding how it plays a role both in real estate and construction. And my background is actually in commercial construction. So I used to build buildings. That's really how I started my career. So whenever I can merge sustainability, technology into construction, as you'll probably get from me, I get pretty pumped about it and look forward to sharing some information. So Jennifer, if we want to cruise through to my first slide, that would be great. So what I want to do is give a little bit of the perspective of what we're seeing from a realtor perspective, from a consumer, and kind of how we're seeing data around sustainability being managed. And although this may not first feel like it aligns with the topic of this conversation, we're going to tie it all together because obviously consumer perception and what they understand is a critical component to sustainability and driving some of the offsite construction things that both Joe and Dennis will be talking about. So I just want to run through, and the timing of this was perfect. We just released our 2025 sustainability report. So that little QR code at the top will bring you right to it. So don't feel like you have to write all this stuff down or take screenshots. But I wanted to talk a bit about, from a realtor perspective, so agents and brokers, people helping to transact and get people in and out of homes. We asked a number of questions around sustainability elements, how they understand it, and then what clients are seeing. And so we're starting to see some uptick, but as you can see, the majority of realtors aren't really working with these sustainability elements. Rarely is kind of the biggest number you see on there. And to me, my perspective is like, this should be top of mind, and this should be a conversation that we're having across every home sale and purchase. Just want to click. Yep. Cool. And then the other part that I find interesting as well is just the sustainability topics. There's some real simple ones in there. I mean, energy efficient appliances. I don't even quite frankly know why we talk about that anymore. That seems like it's just a standard, right? But some of the things that are starting to work their way up in terms of understanding, and where I think there's an education component, are things that we're going to talk about a bit today when it comes to insulation and air sealing, and how prefab offsite can help support some of those efforts. Okay, so that's kind of the agent broker perspective. In terms of clients, what we wanted to better understand is when a client, somebody looking to buy a home, is coming and talking to one of our realtors, do they actually care about energy efficiency? Are they looking at sustainability? And this is kind of an odd graph in my opinion, but I'm not the survey team. But one thing to point out here, which I find really interesting, is that this is the past 3 years of data. And you can start to see that at least the lines are starting to move a little bit to the left, which means more people are starting to pay attention to what energy efficiency is, what it means. And so if you just click next, please, Jennifer, you'll start to see some of the items that they find important. And one of the things, again, that I want to make sure we focus on throughout this is, when it comes to offsite, things like indoor air quality and other areas are places where there can be some interesting features to support the need for that type of construction. Okay, appraisers. This one's really interesting because if, these appraisers essentially are determining the price of homes. And when we asked our membership, if they believe appraisers were educated on the importance of, or the value of sustainability features, most of them really weren't sure, which again shows me kind of an education gap. If you click on the next one. And the other component is taking that into account when they're valuing homes. And so again, there's kind of this there's still this wishy-washy area of this not sure how much people are actually paying attention, specifically appraisers, when it comes to the value of sustainability within the ecosystem, as well as making sure that's accounted for when they're valuing homes. And then the kind of last data point I want to cover, because I think this is important. I'm sure you're all familiar with the MLS. The MLS actually has the ability to collect data related to sustainability. As you can see here, about 44% of the respondents confirmed that there are data fields within the MLS that can support some of the efforts related to sustainability. And ultimately, I think, again, some of the things we'll talk about when it comes into modular and building off site and bringing things to site. One thing that's a little concerning is the fact that even though there are all these fields that can be used in the MLS, they're not used very often. And I think this is an important component because it ties into educating people on understanding the value of what sustainability can do for both the home and the future. And so really what I wanted to try to do is just give you some data points to tie in. If you go to the next slide, please, tie in kind of, there's 4 areas that I think are really important that hopefully you'll see some themes throughout this conversation around risk and resilience. The importance of data transparency. I think we're in every industry challenged with that. Financial incentives, understanding why you do these things, not just because it's good for the environment, but of course there are usually financial incentives behind it. And then education. So I just wanted to kind of set the stage on from like a agent broker, a data collection, what we're kind of seeing in our space, and would love to then hand it off to Dennis to dive into a few more details.
Yeah, right on. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate that. And I think a lot of the data that I'm going to share is going to reinforce some of your points and even ask us to kind of explore a few more questions there. So just a quick overview. I'm Dennis Stegwall, president of the Housing Innovation Alliance. Great to be here with Aaron and the EBA team to share some of what we're working on. We are a national network of about 2,000 companies focused on strategic growth and innovation within home building and community development. So our worlds collide perfectly in around these particular topics, and always great to be here with Jennifer, Dan, and Joe. One of the things I kind of want to highlight first as we get into this is we were a part of a study called the American Home Study, and for us it was important to understand where are consumers in their purchasing behavior, what decisions are driving it. We saw some of the data from what Dan was included there, and so for us, before we start working with our network of builders and developers, it's really understanding what do people want versus what we're providing to them, and then what's the best way to provide that value. So one of the things that we did was partner with this group called the American Home Study. They started this research work back in March of 2020. So if you think about where we were at that point in time as a society, and what really started started out of the pandemic became more of a longitudinal study of how do people think about house and home and how are their purchasing behaviors evolving over time. One of the things that we see, and kind of tying back to Dan's data points, is a lot of the reasons why folks are looking at these energy saving features or these other features that are providing what they describe to be as unique benefits. And it's highlighted on another slide we have here around some of the indoor air quality, water quality, and et cetera, is it comes back to this key motivator around it improves my health and wellness. And you can see these 2 trend lines. This shows where we were when we ran wave 4 of the study in October of 22 versus wave 3 of the study in October of 22 versus wave 4 of the study in May of 25. So the most recent data set that we have just from earlier this summer. And you can see a massive jump in, we're making these decisions because it's better for us. What we see in this study data, and we don't get into all of it right now, is the fact that a lot of the trade-offs we're willing to make when we're buying a new home come back to giving me the things that I know that my family needs. And a lot of these data points come back to something that I think of, someone the EVA crowd will know very well, Gene Myers, and what Thrive Homes has done in a lot of their communication strategies. And it comes back to this picture of a woman leaning over a high chair feeding her baby, and it says the air they breathe is as important as the food you feed them. So until you can get a message that truly resonates like that around what building performance means for you and your family, I think it's really hard to communicate that value. So I think, one, consumers are asking for it, and what we're going to try and do is give you a couple ways that you can get it. So we can flip to the next slide there, Jennifer. All right, so kind of jumping into this and some of the data points again that we had shared, that Dan had shared, highlight some of the things that consumers are looking for when it comes to green or sustainable features. Our data reinforces a lot of those same points. What we see is consumers are looking for indoor air quality, they're looking for water quality, they're looking for energy efficiency. So what we started to ask is, let's look back and say, do consumers care? That we know what they want from a lifestyle benefit and from a health and wellness perspective, but do they care about how the homes are being built? And we've run a number of different conversations around this over the past few years. And we pulled out a study that HUD had run maybe about 20 years ago that talked about consumer perceptions of offsite construction. So within the latest wave of the American Home Study, we wove in a few questions around, do they understand the different types do consumers generally understand the different types of construction? Do they care? And what kind of attributes or qualities do they associate with each? And again, not going to go into all the details of that study, but this is the first year that we ran the American Home Study that we also include Gen Z. And what I think is interesting about the trend lines that we see on this data set is not necessarily that there's an increased awareness around manufactured modular site built, but it's the fact that there's less of a concern around what site built construction might be when you look at Gen Z. So I think right now, construction is construction. Whereas I think there was a moment in time when a lot of folks thought that if we think about baby boomers, whether they're younger, older, or even Gen X, had a stigma around certain types of prefabricated construction solutions. I think we're starting to see that wane, and we're starting to see that in this data set that we're looking at here. So, jumping around. All right, great. So one of the things that another set of data that we wanted to run. So now we understand where consumers are, and what they expect out of house and home, and kind of what they think about the different ways in which homes are being built. One of the things that we wanted to do is run another study and understand, well, what are the areas of focus for the top 200 builders in the country from an innovation perspective? So we partnered up with Ivory Innovations, a professional builder, and wove this into their housing design survey in both 2024 and then the top 200 survey in 2025. We have some trend lines around this, but really what you see is the biggest areas of focus are areas of focus that can be resolved by emphasizing the benefits of prefabricated housing systems or systems built housing solutions. So again, I think in some ways we're preaching the choir a little bit. I think the EVE audience gets this more than anybody else that we typically communicate with. But again, those top three areas around reduction in cycle time, reducing material costs, and to really improve quality and reduce labor costs. I mean, when you look at those 4 out of the top 5, those are inherent benefits of working within modular construction or other forms of offsite construction.
And now we're going to look at, so Joe Butler's with us from Amherst, and he's actually doing this. So his organization put together the study, and so we'll pass it over to him to talk about some of these things that they've learned.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. I'm Joe Butler. I am part of the studio built team, which is by Amherst, a real estate investment firm located based out of Austin. The very first thing that we don't do is we're not a modular business, builder business. We're actually a real estate investment and development business with a modular factory that we use to supply all of our product from. And so one of the things that we embarked on in 24 between July and August 2024 was a survey of our own, surveying 1,000, 18 plus aged adults on what the knowledge base was of the acceptance and around modular as a building system. And I think it was, very pleasant to find that there was a lot of, consumer acceptance, a lot more consumer knowledge around what modular actually was than we probably anticipated, and maybe a lot of people anticipated. And Dennis kind of hit this in, for us, the way that we look at it as a developer, as an investment firm, as having all of the integrated capabilities to, go buy land and go, deliver a product at the end of it for sale or for rent, is that we realize high performance equals more than energy. And energy plus cost certainty plus wellness plus durability plus speed and delivery, as Dennis had broken out on that last slide, were really, really important. And this survey that we conducted, you can see in the data that was left behind, and all the results kind of pointed to the fact that there was a lot more knowledge of these items. Question one, very simply, the familiarity with the homes. What do you think modular is? How do you, what's the appealing part to it? All of those items were picked up on and probably articulated a lot better than we anticipated. So I think that's what we kind of keyed in on, and that's what our delivery system is keyed in on. Outside of just the typical high performance, our value, SEER rating, code compliance piece, is that there's a whole bunch more delivery of high performance. And I think we've had a lot of great success in understanding how to deliver that, and the capability of modular to especially deliver, high completed product that comes out of the factory and the system and turns over very quickly at a very high, level of quality. The easy way I always say it is, we always have this, I always share this diagram that says that our homes are 30% more efficient above our code in Texas. And it's because we built a tighter, better insulated shell. We add the smart windows, and we add all of the energy efficient appliances and DC lighting, but that all adds up to like real high performance value across the board to an investor, to a homeowner, to a resident of a home, and to the builder. So I think all of that points back to this data, which is we can share to anybody who would like to see this. So that's kind of what we're delivering as the high performance as a whole solution.
Yeah, no, I love it, Joe. I'm kind of, oh, sorry, Jennifer. So no, I love it, Joe. And I think kind of transitioning and building on that. So if we look at all the data sets, we look at your work at within the Studio Build team. One of the same things that we want to do is really demonstrate, well, where does the rubber meet the road with all this conversation? So again, if we're kind of building on the storyline, if the consumer livability and the industry buildability story have to marry up for true attainability and kind of creating communities where people can thrive, what does that look like when we roll it out? So in kind of a very public fashion, we built the concept home called the Picket Fence here in Pittsburgh. And the first concept home that was built based off the American Home Study was built with traditional construction on site. We wanted to kind of swing the pendulum all the way to the other end of the spectrum and went with full volumetric modular. And the idea there was, there was a couple stories we wanted to tell. One, we wanted to work with a manufacturing partner that already understood what high performance was, and then push their boundaries was kind of the second piece, and introduce new systems and technologies that could then be rolled out to other customers in a much simpler fashion. So we haven't, the research is still being conducted on this project from a process perspective. We've partnered with Cal Poly and the University of Pittsburgh to kind of take a deep dive into what worked through the design, engineering, and manufacturing of this home, what was then scaled out to the existing customer base of this particular modular producer, and then what did the various trades that had never worked with modular before on site learn from this process, and what would they do differently now going forward. One of the biggest takeaways, I think I'll just reinforce, is what Joe said. Within that controlled factory environment, some of the inherent benefits around quality control make it much easier to achieve your performance standards. But then when it comes to introducing new ways of doing things or new technologies, you're training the team that's going to show up at site once, because it's the team that shows up at the factory every day. Right. And again, it just makes it much easier for that to be rolled out. If you think about working with a variety of custom builders or builder dealers that might work with a particular modular manufacturer, this allows a number of smaller players to have the same kind of crowdsourced benefit, if you will, of these technologies and solutions. Okay, we can. So just to highlight
Dennis,
yeah.
I just have a quick question. Are you seeing that same kind of opportunity with codes and standards that, if the factory can receive a certification, then it accrues to all the builders around that factory as well?
Well, I mean, in many ways, yes. So I can start with the one that we worked with here in Pittsburgh, and kind of just from the experience of the various tours that we've run and folks that have come through our concept house and then have worked with them, and kind of the full circle feedback loop. Yeah, I mean, once you work on a project like this, if you buy into the solution set, which ideally that's why you're working on it in the first place, you may learn 6 things and hopefully 3 stick with you, kind of scenario.
Sure.
Right. And yeah, so you can say the better they get at delivering that for the customers that are willing to pay for it, the lower cost it gets for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And then it becomes a standard across the, it becomes part of the standard offering or package, if you will. And we absolutely saw that within this particular factory. I mean, there's a number of homes that they sell to dealers that are located all throughout rural Pennsylvania that are using some of the same systems and technologies that were showcased within the Picket Fence that might not otherwise have been incorporated into their production model.
That's great. Thank you.
Yep. So we set out with this particular project, we set out with 3 core goals that we really wanted to challenge ourselves with. The first one was we wanted to make sure that we were delivering a high performance home. All the data told us this is what consumers are looking for. We leaned on the Zero Energy Ready standard as kind of our platform for this particular house. We focused heavily on indoor air quality, going above and beyond some of the standard requirements. We focused on construction waste reduction. So how much within the factory and performing that same scope on site can we reduce construction waste? It didn't get down to quite a 5-gallon bucket, but I think we were able to reduce construction waste down to about the 50-gallon barrel. And I think Joe's probably experienced some of the same. And then another piece of it was carbon characterization. And can we increase the quantity of homes in a neighborhood while reducing the overall footprint? that came from both an embodied and operational carbon perspective. So as you can see along the way, we hit zero energy ready. We hit those standards and certification requirements. With the waste reduction, we didn't quite hit our 90%, but we got to 87% as validated by Cal Poly. And then on the carbon emission reduction, we were able to hit 65% reduction. So again, not quite where we wanted to be, but I'd say these are a darn good place to land. And it just gives us an opportunity to continue to improve. And again, many of the lessons that were learned through this process have now stuck with that particular factory. And all of these learnings were published throughout the entire process through ProBuilder, as this was one of their idea homes, similar to the panorama house that Thrive built and showcased as well. Just a quick shot from within the facility. I think as we talk about high performance construction, we talk about the ease of working within some of these environments. Each factory has kind of its own set of capabilities. So not all should be created equal, and not all factories can produce the same type of quality of product or the same typologies of products. So understanding who you're working with and what they're best at is really important. I use this particular shot to showcase that because this is one of the few factories in the Northeast that actually have a pit. If you think of like an automotive workshop where you can actually get underneath the car, in this particular factory, there's 2 stations where you can get underneath the home and actually be performing work on it. So you're working around the house, you're working under it, and the roof's running parallel to it as well when you think about it from a production method perspective. So kind of a really interesting way to be able to manage a number of different installations and processes at the same time. And then the next photo, Jennifer, I think this is just some couple quick lessons learned. So again, this team here on the call gets this more than most, but it's really got to be a collaborative process and understanding what do you want to achieve for the consumer and what is the factory best positioned to deliver. And then kind of there's going to be a bit of a tug of war and some tension that gets created there to get to the ultimate endpoint of the best solution for your market. I think making sure that it's a completely integrated approach, I think that is much easier within a factory environment than it would be on site. I mean, you're going through completely computer design models. You're looking at clash detection all up front. You're looking at how do I minimize any waste and how do I minimize the number of times people have to touch product, whether they're building in-house or building on the site. So just a lot of choreography that happens on the upfront piece that makes this work really well for high performance. One of the jokes that we have from this, and I'm sure, Joe, you've been down this path before, is like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. There's a lot of things you can do with volumetric modular construction or offsite construction. I think it's just making sure that you're making the right choice, know what you want to build, and pick the right system to build it. So I'm not here to promote one over the other. I'm just saying there are certain benefits to the one that we use for this particular project. There's others for other projects. Again, rehearse that choreography. For those of you I saw in the chat, there's a few that are kind of what I'll call offsite curious. Make sure you really play this out a few times. The expenses, the mistakes you learn in the field, if your crane has to sit an extra couple hours, get quite expensive. It's worth the team's time to kind of walk through that a couple times beforehand. And then make sure you're leveraging these learnings beyond the build. It's really like, how does what you achieved with that factory partner and with your installation partners, how does that parlay into creating real value for your customers over the long term and help you drive that cost down while delivering an enhanced level of performance? Our kind of internal goals are can we add 2% to the cost of the house, but make it 20% better? It's kind of what we keep working through internally.
So the very last slide is just for another session that I'm doing with EBA on housing's future is affordable, healthy, and sustainable. And they'll be talking about other ways to deliver with offsite construction. But I'm going to stop sharing. We're going to go into some questions and would love to see questions from the audience. There we go. Stopping sharing. So as you guys think about what you want to discuss with these panelists, this is an amazing amount of information that we've just taken a look at. And what I love about this group, the concept house, and then Amherst in particular, is that it's an open book. It's here so that the industry can learn. And Joe and you guys, I appreciate so much about Amherst in general. So tell us how you guys are delivering. Amherst is responding to the trends for healthier, more sustainable homes and how that product is being delivered.
Yeah, we of course have a tremendous Amherst, being, a real estate investment firm that's largely, focused on acquiring single family homes for rent, has provided a tremendous amount of data, right? And so we've been able to kind of learn from that data on product development. I think the greatest capability of like leveraging the system of modular studio built for Amherst is its ability to be able to work from the underwriting. So understanding the full economics of real estate, and backing our way into that through the system that we use to deliver it, the speed, understanding what's important, through the studies that Dennis is involved in, doing something very similar, but being able to see it from this underwriting position is highly powerful. So we can, develop product that's very specific to a target, right? The target of investment, the target of mortgages. We know, we have a 145 home community that we're developing right now in Lockhart, Texas, that we're really able to understand the real estate market first in the underwriting and then deliver product back into it. That was I think a one of a kind product for Texas. And the one of a kind product means it was the first community that I've seen of this scale in Texas delivered using modular. Also delivered at a higher performing capability. We did our study and we were 33% more energy efficient than a site built home was, and the code built to the current code. So we were able to achieve all those different things using all of that data up front first. So I think, like, for us, that was the big value proposition. If you were to look at and key in on, other than being totally verticalized, because we are verticalized, we go through the underwriting component, we source land, we go through entitlement, we design the home, we install the home, and then we either sell that home or we stabilize that home with a resident. So we have a whole bunch of different ways that we're managing, but being integrated and seeing it from the real estate perspective up front has been about as powerful as you can make a developer.
Yeah, no, those are some great points, Joe. And I just want to add too that I was just at a house set for Certainty, and they have a product called One Precision Assemblies. And it was an infill project, and basically this was triggered by a comment in the chat, but asking about roof panels. And they had, everything was panelized. This One Precision Assembles, the floors were panels, but it could be customized. So it was a custom build 3-story infill project. The crane, all the labor, all the product, everything was on one lot, and the house was built in 2 days using those panels. Now, Dennis and I think Joe both alluded to the fact that all the planning that has to happen in advance. So the design had to be in place, but it ended up being a zero energy ready home. And I imagine that you could do the solar PVs, which was exactly the question that was in the chat. But Dennis, so who are some of the custom builders that are putting this into practice that you've been working with, and where have you seen success with other offsite delivering more efficient solutions?
Yeah, well, I thanks for the question. I just kind of want to build off your example of the OPA system for a second there, and I think one of the things that we didn't necessarily hit on through the conversation is I think that when you look at these forms of construction methods, it becomes a way to empower a lot of the smaller custom builders and developers as well, because you need far less resources internally to execute on these projects, because you're shifting a lot of that into the factory setting. So a good partnership is critical. But it does allow, I think, a lot of smaller players to participate in those, whether they're kind of the infill projects you described or otherwise. I think the other thing that we see is innovation on the business model, right? So the OPA system is a collection of parts and pieces from the Certainty catalog, which they're providing to you turnkey direct without going through a distributor. So they're providing the added value and then partnering with a network of manufacturers. So I think there's different ways that have been tried on this, but I think, again, it's opening the door for a lot of different parties to participate in this kind of delivery model, if you will, which I think is really interesting. So kind of using that to segue into like which custom builders are using it that we work with. I will say, most of our network is going to be the higher volume production folks that we work with in specifically. But when we set out on the concept to deliver the concept home, the picket fence was meant to be a representation for how we can take a lot of the ideas and concepts we're showcasing and apply it for those folks that want to develop more of a custom product for infill housing solutions in the markets that they live in, so they can serve where they call home. So all that to say, we have examples of folks that are working. I can highlight some in the Northeast that are building, single family, attached and detached housing solutions and townhome product up to 5 packs and 7 packs that are ranging from, I'd say, 1,200 to 2,400 square feet, and achieving these same levels of performance, and they're doing it very cost competitively. So this is, and again, these are homes that are designed relying on a pretty much you have a standardized volume you work in, but then once you're willing to, you kind of get creative on how you tailor the internal parts and pieces, where your walls are located, how you focus on your modularity of the bathrooms and the kitchens to get a mix and match set that allows you to produce a lot of different product type from the same production line cost effectively.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you're hitting on, which Joe does, and what we're thinking about is just the putting things in a way that can go to scale. So putting the recipes or the assemblies together with Build Exact, what we've done is we worked with the U.S. Department of Energy and the Advanced Building Construction Group to create zero carbon aligned recipes and assemblies that go into the product, into our construction management platform, and that builders can just use and select from to when they're doing an estimate. And that way it's easy for them. They don't have to know the factors that go into creating the zero carbon aligned. They can just choose from that catalog. So kind of shifting gears a little bit, Dan, how are these features helping agents sell homes? How are you guys seeing that with NAR?
Yeah, so it's as we all know, it's been a pretty interesting market over the past handful of years. It's been a complete seller's market for the most part. And so, as you saw from some of the data points when it came to sustainability, unfortunately, that was not necessarily top of mind. Um, Interestingly, I just had a conversation with one of our members who's down in Florida, and the dynamics are starting to shift where it's becoming a buyer's market. So, as you all probably know, like a healthy market is 5 to 6 months of housing supply. When it was really tight, I mean, we were seeing a month, 2 months maybe. Down where this person was in Florida, they're seeing 7 months. So, the point of me telling you that is I really believe that people are going to start to think more about the concepts that Joe, Dennis, and Jennifer have been talking about when it comes to energy efficiency, sustainability, how their homes are built, resiliency. I think it's really going to start to take off. It goes back to that education component, though, as people understanding. As I mentioned earlier, I actually started my career in commercial construction. I used to build buildings, and I was in Wisconsin, so it was a little bit cold. So we had, 3 months out of the year when we had nice weather, but we were building panels in our shop and bringing them out to the field. Not only did it create significant efficiencies, we didn't have to deal with weather, and the workers loved it because they weren't outside in 5-degree weather trying to put walls together. Um, I I think there's huge opportunities when it comes to the education component of both clients as well as agents and brokers so that they can explain what it actually means to build offsite, and ultimately how it's better. So I'm optimistic about where we've come, and given the challenges we've seen in the real estate space, that this is a great opportunity to kind of shift that conversation in a way that provides ultimately a better product to the end client.
Yeah, there's a lot that I've been looking at too, just to where the consumer's interest is right now and how Gen Z is looking at home ownership. Um, which you shared a little bit, but I think that's really interesting, and I think Offsite is positioned well to deliver that. Along with the making it actually affordable for them. Joe, you have, sorry, go
Jennifer,
ahead.
sorry, real quick. Sorry, I just wanted to add on to that. So you just talked about the affordability component. And again, as we all probably know, we are running into significant labor shortages. Um, and so having the ability to build things within a controlled environment and even starting to integrate robotics into that to the construction of homes, I think is going to be critical to keeping up with the demand that we're seeing. So I just wanted to bring that up that like, we start to look at like the economic dynamics of labor shortages, supply challenges. Dennis' example of reducing waste is so critical. The amount of waste that you see on construction sites is almost embarrassing sometimes. And so when you start to pull together the dynamics of like labor supply, the things that allow for, quite frankly, affordability to happen, having it built in a controlled environment where, again, we can start to rely on robotics. And we've got to say AI. If we didn't say AI nowadays, it wouldn't be a panel, but like relying on technology to help support better understanding and constructing in a way that benefits future generations and creates real value.
Yeah, well said. So, Joe, you're dealing with all these things hands-on. What do you see as the challenges and the opportunities?
Yeah, I think we solve some of the challenges just inherently with the system that we use, which Dan was just talking about. It's the challenges are still labor, although you can commoditize the labor very differently in a factory and remove the need for significant skill. It still is a bit of a challenge to get that new trade of intellectual capacity and all those things that you need to find people. The supply chain continues. I mean, even before COVID, the supply chain was always fairly challenging. I still think there's like this piece, and Dan touched on my favorite subject, and I'm going to try not to go down the rabbit hole with my whole heart here, of like the integration of robotics and technology, because the problem that we still have in North America is that we just still continue to try to automate a system that was never intended to be automated, and specifications that were never intended to be automated. And so we still have that challenge. If you go into a mod factory, I always tell everybody when they come to my factory, we have very key automation, very key technology that we feel has a lot of value proposition, a lot of return on investment, but we don't have a robot. And I always tell everybody the reason why we don't have a robot in our factory is because in no modular factory on the planet is the bottleneck in structural, right? There's no bottleneck there. In a modular factory, it's all in the middle whip where you're trying to paint, drywall, flooring, non-value added times, just like any other factory. So those are all challenges. So to me, the biggest challenge right now is product development. It's getting market acceptance around a product that people want and want to pay for, enough can afford to pay for, that can be built more efficiently. And there is no like one product that's specific to all those needs. It's a long evolution, but for some reason, because I think the construction industry is so behind, all these people come and they want to just jump into like, we've got the magic product. And that just doesn't work, because there's no, the real estate industry, the consumer, everybody needs to believe in that product, just not the person building it, right? To me, that's like the inherent problem. So Jennifer, that's kind of like the challenge that we always see, beyond what we'll call like the typical regulatory challenges, permitting challenges, all of those things. Behind that and solving the housing crisis, challenges that you always hear and talk about. So to me, that's what I see as the biggest challenges around product development.
Yeah, that's really well said. And I think that what I'm seeing too is like I'm talking to a company, Fornitos, that's in Texas as well, but they're ICC approved. And so that goes past that, expedites the permitting process, and helps, and it's a national code, so it can work through any geography. So there's an advantage there. Jake asks in the chat, does a panel think full volumetric modular the best solution compared to panelized or partially modular? So I'm sure Dennis and Joe, you both have an opinion on that, and I'd welcome them both.
Yeah, no, happy. I was about to respond in the chat, so I'm glad you pulled it up. I think that kind of going back to an earlier point I made in the chat, there's a technology solution mix that we need region by region, Jake. So I think you highlighted that. It's going to vary. I kind of alluded earlier that it's going to be depending on the project, you can determine the best system, or you could, so again, depending if as a developer you have a solution you want to build, you can decide what the best offsite system is to build it. Alternatively, as a builder, you can make a commitment to work with one system and get really, really good at it. I think over the long term, where we end up is some sort of a hybrid approach that gets traction, more broadly speaking. And I think we can kind of pull on the thread of that OPA system that Jennifer mentioned. I mean, so that's, if you think about the quality of the thermal envelope that they're delivering, well, how do we start to get to panels that are higher content and flexible in their solution sets? So now we have fully integrated MEPs, and we can flat pack this product versus shipping full volumetric modules, which I don't have a problem with. It's just a matter of different crane sizes, different flexibilities and access points, overhead lines, et cetera. So there's, again, it is going to certainly vary market by market, and skill set within those various markets. But I think over the long term, to answer your question, it's a hybrid approach. What do you think, Joe?
Oh, is that for me? Oh, yeah. I started off my career in the early 90s, in mass timber and SIP panels, and then kind of made my way through components and all these things before anybody even really knew about them. And part of the great mystery of the advanced systems of their day. I agree. I think there's our Verse Lockhart product, right now, that is a hybrid approach. We do what makes sense volumetrically in the factory, and then we make sense of the rest of it with panelized, to site build a 2-car garage that you can't get a 22-foot wide box down the road, or you don't want to put 2 boxes together. So we have a very hybrid approach to that, which I think is like the wave of the future. I think it's a hybrid approach. I think it's varying materials in varying different ways, with varying different, delivery systems. I agree. I don't think there's a one size fits all at all for just about anything, or they would build every car the same, but they don't. There's different ways to deliver different things.
Now there's another question for Aaron. Does EBA have a program in place that resembles the ResNet, what they're doing to provide HERS scores for modular build homes?
So EBA, we're an education body and bring people together to collaborate and share best ideas. We're not a codes body. So there's not a plan for EBA to have a code like the ResNet Offsite pilot program. But I think back to Dennis's comment, like it's a great question, because I think the thing that you need to look at is, where does the building code official sit, or where do the ratings sit? And my take, and Dennis, I'm kind of looking at you on this, is if you can move those people to the factory and have them certify the HERS rating out of the factory, or certify that it meets something like the ICC code of the factory, it's very powerful and allows that factory to ship more regionally. Instead of, I think the big challenge has been in Colorado in particular, is there are something like 40 different building codes in the state of Colorado that you have to ship into. So it's a great question. We're not a rating body. So quick answer, no. Dennis,
Excellent.
thoughts? Want to add on?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it on the head there when you talk about there's different pathways. The company that Jennifer mentioned in Texas that has gone through the ICC certification, but then also this idea of code harmonization across municipalities and marketplaces. I mean, and so Pennsylvania, where I'm based, we're a bit spoiled in that we can submit, if we've built the house in the same market before, we can submit our building permit and our production permit at the same time, or a production application, and the minute the permit's approved, we have our boxes.
Yeah.
Right. And now our timeline is not nearly, the approval timeline here isn't nearly as drawn out as it might be in Colorado. But that still saves you 6 to 8 weeks.
Absolutely.
Right. And that's real time when you got to get a roof overhead. But yeah, I think code harmonization and the ability for state level approvals to drill all the way down to the local municipality within the state itself, but then in the surrounding states is kind of, that's an adoption conversation, right? That's like critical for it to accelerate adoption. And just while we're on it, I mean, I'm as many people that have worked with me know, I'm a big proponent of what the state of Colorado is doing to accelerate the adoption of some of these building systems and solutions. Well, so whether they're importing or translating technologies from other states, but also helping to scale what's already within the state boundaries, and set up new operations for existing operators. I think there's a huge potential, but it's going to come to being able to control that takeoff and that demand side. And make sure that it can flow as quickly as what the factories can produce it. Because I think Joe can attest to this as well. Those numbers look great when we put them up for volumetric modular, and the speed of production and what can be achieved economically and through the efficiency. So marrying high performance building practices with high performance business practices. But it's real easy for that to go off the rails too, and not capture those benefits because of either the production model isn't running as smoothly in the factory, or you lose time on site. So it doesn't matter if you're 3 weeks, if you're 3 weeks faster, if you still can't get your driveways finished, your sidewalks in, and your patios done.
Yeah, well said. So, one of the other things that I'm thinking about is the operational costs. So, more and more so, energy across the country, the price of energy is escalating, increasing. And so people are thinking about the cost of ownership of a home, from a climate perspective. We're watching one of the biggest hurricanes hit Jamaica right now. We've had lots of flooding, and storms recently. We need to be thinking about all these different aspects, and how are we helping homeowners think about lowering those operational costs? And then how can we think as an industry about using that to sell to consumers, because they need to be thinking about that when they're signing the mortgage, and purchasing a home. Joe, does Amherst look at that in particular?
Yeah, I think that's an important part. I mean, anytime you're an operator in that built to rent space, your total cost of ownership is a significant KPI to work against, right? And so I think we've spent a lot of time understanding where home operation costs exist and how to, all the homes that we build, Lockhart and all the new homes that we build, every one of our homes has DC lighting in them. It's something that we made a conscious effort to try and solve to lower electricity bills. Energy Star is a big part of us. Being Energy Star, approved on all of our projects is another big piece and component. And we're slowly starting to inch our way into higher performing envelopes as we get there, which, being in a factory built situation, and delivery system, you can do that. You can create higher performing buildings for less cost because they're in a controlled environment where you have a lot more control over them and a higher quality. So I think, I think all of those are very important. But as we've pivoted into selling homes now in the market, I think we've also realized that there is in fact, a desire, from especially Dan, from a realtor's perspective, especially in Lockhart, where it's a first-time home buyers community, bedroom community outside of Austin, where you can go forward to go buy a home for under $300,000. I think with that generation, there's a lot of uptick in the interest, because you do in fact have greater energy efficiency, and you are thinking about the environment. And we're now just figuring out how to market that. I think that's the other piece. Like for me, it's always comes down to product again. It's always the product. To me, it's always product. I always tell everybody it's always the product, and the change management of that product and getting consumers to want that product. We haven't spent enough time. We've tried to convince each other in the industry how much we want it, but we haven't convinced the consumer why. So
Just like
no,
Dan said, it was education. Yeah.
yeah, just not at scale, right? We need that education, at scale to have people just demand that they want more out of their home.
Yeah.
Right?
I also think there's an organization I've known for a number of years that's more on the commercial side, but as they were trying to create more green commercial buildings, their pitch wasn't necessarily it's better for the environment. It was we're going to save you money. And so at the end of the day, I mean, affordability, as we've been talking about, is kind of everything. So part of my perspective is like, how do we frame some of what we all know is better for business, better for the environment, and ultimately cost savings to the consumer at the end of the day, I think is so critical. I actually think, Jennifer, you shared this report that Thumbtack did recently around some key takeaways on a survey they did was like 90% of homeowners across all generations um, do pay attention to resistant materials, which I think can easily tie into this conversation. And then 74% of them rank energy and cost savings as like the top goal for how we build future homes. So, I mean, this all ties together ultimately to serve the consumer. And again, it's education and people understanding why this stuff's important. And everybody can relate to saving money. So, how do you take what we know is the right thing and potentially the future of building and convert that into dollar signs so that people start to pay more attention to it? I mean, I feel like simple things like smart thermostat, like the sales pitch behind that was we will save you money because we have this cool thermostat that can figure out what you're doing in your house and when we need to heat and cool it, and it's ultimately going to save you dollars. So everybody got those thermostats. So how do we take what we're talking about today when it comes to modular and prefab off-site to kind of sell, so to speak, that this is a better way to build and ultimately will save the consumer money?
Yeah. Thank you, Dan. Well, thank you all for joining us today. I know we're right up against the end of our hour here. Aaron, thank you so much for
Yeah.
inviting us. This has been a thrill.
No, if it's,
I learned a lot more from Joe and Dennis and Dan today. Thanks everybody in the audience for joining us. And I think that we're all, and maybe we can put our information in the chat real quick. If
Yeah,
anybody
that'd be
needs
great.
or wants to reach out, and I see that Aaron's making some plugs, so I'll leave the last few seconds to you to finish your plugs here.
Yeah, no, just Dan and Dennis and Joe and Jennifer, thank you so much for being with us. I did include a for home builders. We have a special called the Christmas bonus through the end of this year, $500 to attend the EVA Summit in 2026. We'll also send that to our panelists to thank them for presenting for us today. And as we said, this will be on the eba.org LMS system within the next couple of days, and we'll have it at the Better Homes, Better Future podcast. So you can listen to it again. We'll share the slides, lots of great data. If you're able to reach out to the team, great. If you need to connect with any of them, just email me, aaron@eba.org. So thank you all so very much. Great to see you as always.
Excellent.
you.
Thanks, everybody.